The longest cave system in the world is located under these gently rolling hills in south-central Kentucky. It winds its way through millions of years of history and miles of rock, daring adventurers to follow even deeper as more is discovered about the cave every day. Mammoth Cave National Park calls to the explorer in everyone.
I definitely think that something in our nature drives us to explore. Some people more than others. Some people are maybe a little bit more inquisitive. I think there's a good analogy between exploration and science, because science is a scientific exploration, but it's still journeying into the unknown. You don't know what you're going to find. You find something, you share that knowledge with the world.
The fact that in the 21st century that there are still places that you can go that no human has ever been before is a pretty rare thing. And it's easy to think that the world is just completely explored, that everything's used up. But there's places in caves where literally you can go that no human has ever been before. And Mammoth Cave, we can have that experience, but it's here in rural Kentucky. You can drive right up to the entrance, and the cave is so extensive that there are passages, many passages that are still not explored.
How many places on the earth can you say that, well, no one's ever seen that mountain, or no one's ever been to that ocean? Well, you can still say that about caves, because you can't see caves, so you don't even know if they're there. So the challenge is to find a cave, and if you find something, it's pretty guaranteed, if it was hard to find, that no one's ever been there before. And so, you get to be the first one to put footprints in Virgin Passage. And that, just from the purely exploration point of view, that's pretty darn exciting. It's like going to the moon, almost.
Stories of exploration take many forms. They are interwoven into the life of the land, making a tapestry of lives lived and history made. Mammoth Cave is a way to wonder, inviting all to partake of the beauty above and below ground. Welcome to an unprecedented exploration of Mammoth Cave National Park. It took water and time, tens of thousands of years to form, drop by drop and level by level, becoming the longest cave system in the world. Mammoth Cave is at once dark, terrifying, and mysterious. What's beyond that black opening? Massive rooms, seemingly endless passages, and beauty beyond belief. The cave calls out to be explored, discovered. There's a legend about how the cave was discovered. There were some determined hunters chasing a wounded bear, and they stumbled on the entrance. But the cave was discovered before that, thousands of years before that, by those who felt the pull of the unknown.
The Native Americans were in this area of Kentucky for a good 10,000 plus years. But by 5,000 years ago, they began exploring not just a few hundred feet, but probably several miles into the cave. And we have evidence of that in some of the deep passages. And it seems to be just for the purpose of exploring. I think like humans, anywhere, if you saw a hole in the ground the size of the entrance of Mammoth Cave and it just went on, you would be enticed or tempted to continue. Maybe each time you went in there a little bit farther each time.
It's very cool to come to Mammoth Cave as an explorer and explore in the cave. I've been on some exploration trips where we're probably 2 miles from the nearest entrance, and you'll be in a passageway or crawling along, and you'll find a reed torch where they've, banged it on the ceiling to knock the charcoal off, and their pieces are still lying on the ground. So you realize, you've got all your gear on and, your synthetic fabrics to keep you warm and everything. And there was a Native American way back there, mining for some gypsum. So for me, that's this amazing connection between the present and the past that, like the caves really are this, like a time capsule. The only difference between that person and me being back there is, I'm using an LED light and, these fancy clothes, and they were back there with, straw shoes and a reed torch.
These early explorers went into that darkness, leaving behind clues about why they were there and what their lives were like.
But what's remarkable is that exploration starts about 5,000 years ago, and they continue that probably off and on for the next 2,000 years, and it's not till really about 3,000 years ago that suddenly, at least speaking in terms of prehistory, they become interested in some minerals that can be found in the cave. They're quite common. These are minerals that form in these very large, dry passages. Calcium sulfate is the most common one. It's what we call gypsum. It's the very pretty gypsum flowers and crust that forms in the walls of the cave. There's also some other sulfate minerals. Sodium sulfate, which is Glauber's salt, and epsomite, or magnesium sulfate. And these salts, which also form in these large dry caves, have medicinal uses. Sodium sulfate and epsomite, we still use them today.
Well, some of the things we found inside the cave that are reminders of those early people would be cane reed torches, the same kind of cane reed that still grows out on the Green River today. I mean, you could see it down in the cave where they burned them to light their way through the cave. There are scraps of woven materials that they would have used for cloth that they for whatever reason, dropped in the cave. Pieces of slippers that are woven from plants. So those were just countlessly found in the cave. Pieces of gourds that they used to carry items and to, when they were scraping minerals off the walls, they needed something to carry them, kind of like a basket. The cave has been something like a safety deposit box of things that were everyday items to those people, but were preserved in the cave's environment and now tell us so much about their lives, about the kind of people they were, what they ate, what they wore, even while they were in the cave searching for minerals.
These minerals were important enough to search for deep inside the cave, but there could have been other reasons to brave the darkness.
We have the opportunity to go into a lot of different caves and rock shelters, and when we do, we not only find artifacts, but we often find rock art, petroglyphs, pictographs, things of this nature. And so it clearly speaks of the importance of these places in the ceremonial, religious life of people that were living thousands of years ago. And it appears that, what the evidence would suggest is that Indians were going to a place that was an interface between the worlds that they knew. There was the upper world where everything was perfect. There's the middle world here where we live, where everything's just like you see it. And then there's the underworld where everything is wild and chaotic, not necessarily evil, but dangerous and powerful. You see people going to places where there's an interface between these worlds that are beyond our own. So you see people going to caves to get closer to that underworld connection. You see people going to rock shelters and bluffs, high bluffs, to get closer to that sky, that upper world connection. And I think when they went to those places, they did so with the intent of doing something important, important for themselves, important for their families, maybe important for a larger group. They were doing things, they were doing specific things at these places to benefit themselves or their people.
After thousands of years of exploring, these Native Americans stopped using the cave and seemed to disappear, leaving it to be discovered anew by those who came next. Use of the cave and the surrounding land changed over time, and when the commercial properties of the cave became apparent, it opened up to large-scale exploration and use for the first time.
The biggest use of caves in the very early historic period of the U.S. is mining for saltpeter. And now there are many sources of saltpeter in the world, and most of the time the U.S. was supplied with saltpeter from other parts of the world, but there are two events in the history of the U.S. that cut off our supply to saltpeter at critical times, and of course one was the Revolutionary War, and the second one was the War of 1812. And so there became a huge industry, business in mining saltpeter from caves. It's hard work. Saltpeter mining was miserably hard work, moving a lot of dirt and rock, working underground in dark, long time periods, and they tried to use paid labor in a lot of that work in the early, both the Revolutionary War and the War of 1812, but had a hard time keeping people that on the payroll, so to speak. So they turned increasingly to using slave labor for that activity. So most, at least in big operations like Mammoth Cave and some of the other big saltpeter caves in the eastern U.S. were principally mined with slave labor. There's also a big African American presence in early cave mining and exploration. And in particularly in Mammoth Cave, as they mined for saltpeter and explored the cave, and they were exploring the cave partly to see what was there, but partly to find more sources of the niter dirt, or the calcium nitrate. They discovered these amazing Indian artifacts, including bodies, desiccated bodies, or mummies as they called them. And people wrote about those things. Some of the bodies and the artifacts would get taken out and sent back to the museums in the East Coast. And that began attracting people specifically to the cave to see those kinds of things. So soon after kind of the saltpeter business bottomed out, when the wars ended, the bottom fell out of those industries, people began seeing that they could make a profit on touring, bringing tours to these caves.
In the spring of 1838, cave owner Franklin Gorin opened the cave to further exploration and tourism, using slaves as guides and explorers. A young slave named Stephen Bishop made a name for himself and Mammoth Cave by opening new parts of the cave through his explorations.
As far as history goes, he didn't exist until he came to Mammoth Cave in 1838. Prior to that, he was just another slave, another enslaved person. But then when he came to Mammoth Cave with Franklin Gorin, who owned the cave, and began to explore Mammoth Cave as a teenager, by the way, like 17, 18 years old, all of a sudden it seems that he found a niche. And he loved being underground. He loved finding areas of the cave that no one had ever seen before. And he seems to have fallen in love with just that environment underground. And I think he also enjoyed the position he had as a cave guide and the attention that people gave him as he led them through the cave passageways. You know, it was a unique situation for a group of white people, of Caucasians, to walk underground following a black man, a slave at that, and listening to his directions and doing what he said to do, stepping here, stepping there, handing your lantern and saying, hold this. He had an atypical job for a slave, and he had to have authority about him. Not only that, he was an intelligent man. He learned to read and write. He was exposed to so many worldly matters that honestly my ancestors at the same time period probably had no clue of, because Stephen was enjoying days spent with people from Europe, scientists from all over the country who came to study Mammoth Cave. And yet at the same time, he had to exit the cave and go back to being that enslaved person who knew his place in society.
As more people flocked to the cave, new guides were needed and new slaves were brought in to fill the role.
Franklin Gorin owned a teenage slave boy named Stephen Bishop, and he leased from Thomas Bransford, who was actually my great-great-great-grandfather, two other teenage boys, and their names were Nicholas and Madison Bransford. But documentation in the business ledgers that are in Thomas Bransford's family, who lived in the Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas area, makes it very clear that Thomas fathered Madison, my great-great-grandfather, from a little slave girl named Little Hannah. And so he leased those boys to Franklin Gorin for $100 a year as explorers and guides. That's how we came to Mammoth Cave's first generation.
I would love to have known Matt Bransford, because looking at a sketch of him from 1857, his face looked so kind and his eyes looked so warm and just personable. He strikes me as a person who would have been almost egoless and yet a kind-natured, inquisitive man who cared about his family. He and his wife Parthena had a couple of children who were sold away from them while in slavery, and he was actually approached by a visitor once who asked him, you know, I heard that you had your children sold away from you, but that doesn't bother you, does it? I've heard that it doesn't bother you people to lose your children. And of course, Matt replied to the negative, I beg your pardon, yes, it does bother us. So I think that he was a man who saw a lot of suffering in his life, also a man who met challenges and continued on to rise above his enslavement.
The early cave guides and their families stayed in the area even after they were freed and became an integral part of the history and future of the cave.
Matt Bransford had a son named Henry Bransford who was also a cave guide. He learned actually from his father to guide the cave tours. And both Henry and Matt went from slavery to being freed men in the 1860s, of course. Ironically, you know, you'd think that people, once they got their freedom, would head to the high country, just leave behind any memories they had of enslavement. But Matt and Henry stayed in the area within walking distance of Mammoth Cave. They both had property. They both raised, you know, they continued to raise their families within a short distance of Mammoth Cave. And as a matter of fact, their family's cemetery is there on what was their property. So, because, of course, the park is full of cemeteries. There were so many families here, both black and white. And Matt and Henry and the women in their lives and the children that they raised all stayed here beyond slavery because this was home, I suppose.
Jerry Bransford, great-great-grandson to cave guide Matt Bransford, is continuing the family tradition.
My wife says I'm hooked on the cave, and I am too. I couldn't have known the attachment that you'll develop working in Mammoth Cave until you come here for a season. It's something that grows on you. And so I have a better understanding. When I was a kid, we'd come here, Dad coming home, 4th of July picnic, Memorial Day weekend, but working in the cave puts that in a whole different category. It's something that just gets a real hold on you. You want to go in that big cave, there's a couple rooms in there I could never get used to going into, no matter if I went every day. One of my favorite cousins, one of the favorite cousins that I never knew, you see, he died in 1936, but he had worked in the cave for 37 years when he died. So, what it means for me is actually experiencing what they must have felt. I work a certain amount of hours and go home, but it gives me a feeling of awe when I walk down the cave trails and see Matt, 1850. It's difficult for me to explain to you what that really does to me. Now, he's been gone a long time, but he left a very good ledger that he stood in that very spot. So sometimes I'll go right there and stand for just a minute and try to imagine what he must have felt when he stood there in 1850. Sometimes when especially the historic tour, I'll track into the cave, and I can only imagine what it must have been like escorting kings and queens and prominent and the best educated folk from around the world through the cave in slavery. Sometimes it kind of makes me get a little emotional because it brings up a tear in my eye to think that in the course of a day, maybe folks would come all the way from England sailing the Great Atlantic for weeks to get here, and they would go home. Maybe they leave you a good tip, but you were still in slavery. It's quite colorful, and also Arthur, my dad's oldest brother, had a very nice voice that he said he would always bring his guest here in the 20s. He became full-fledged guide at age 17. He was a lunch carrier by the time he was 11 years old. So he said one of his favorite places to stop was right here on his way to the snowball room, and he would sing an old spiritual that his dad would sing, his father's father would sing, and sometimes with nice folks like you, I stop here and I sing a verse of an old song. Would you like to hear a verse of it? Absolutely. We'll try. It's called Have You Got Good Religion? No one really knows the original writer of the song, but it does go back to bondage days, and I feel a direct tie with this song in regards to some of the things that's happened here with my ancestors. So it goes something like this. Have you got good religion? Have you got good religion? Have you got good religion? Certainly, 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 Lord. Have you been baptized? Have you been baptized? Have you been baptized? Certainly, 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 Lord. Do you love everybody? Do you love everybody?
The sound of the songs of the slave guides echo in the quiet underground, but other voices take up the notes and create new life in the cave. Fascination with sound in the cave environs has brought many to perform, to discover for themselves the magic of the cave. Western Kentucky University Women's Chorus came to the cave to give an unforgettable performance that has become a tradition to many in the region. For many years, writers have been trying to enlighten readers to the beauties of this underground world. Author Ralph Waldo Emerson was eloquent when describing his experiences in the cave.
The mysteries and scenery of the cave had the same dignity that belongs to all natural objects, and which shames the fine things to which we foppishly compare them. On arriving at what is called the Star Chamber, our lamps were taken from us by the guide and extinguished or put aside. And on looking upwards, I saw, or seemed to see, the night heaven, thick with stars glimmering more or less brightly over our heads, and even what seemed a comet flaming among them. All the party were touched with astonishment and pleasure. Our musical friends sung with much feeling a pretty song, and I sat down on the rocky floor to enjoy the serene picture. Some crystal specks in the black ceiling high overhead, reflecting the light of a half-hid lamp, yielded this magnificent effect.
Naturalist John Muir was taken with the wild beauty of the countryside and the untamed feel of the cave itself.
Arrived at the great Mammoth Cave, I was surprised to find it in so complete naturalness. A large hotel with fine walks and gardens is near it, but fortunately the cave has been unimproved, and were it not for the narrow trail that leads down the glen to its door, one would not know that it had been visited. There are house rooms and halls whose entrances give but slight hint of their grandeur. And so also this magnificent hall in the mineral kingdom of Kentucky has a door comparatively small and unpromising. One might pass within a few yards of it without noticing it. A strong, cool breeze issues constantly from it, creating a northern climate for the ferns that adorn its rocky front.
The images from the cave, both drawn and photographed, illustrate the effect that the cave has on the imagination of artists and photographers alike. Noted photographer and writer Frances Benjamin Johnston from Grafton, West Virginia, came to Mammoth Cave in 1891 on a commission from Demorest's Family Magazine. She wrote the text and took the photographs for the June 1892 article. Johnston unearthed stories and images that many Americans had yet to see.
A nearer approach discloses a narrow defile through which we entered the bridal chamber, one of the most famous features of the cave. Upheld at one end by the Pillars of Hercules, the roof is supported on either side by two fine stalactitic columns, Pompey and Caesar, and at the farther end stands the altar, a union of several irregular but graceful stalactites, lavishly decorated with natural scroll work. The same peculiar formation encrusts the ceiling like a mass of ornate carvings, and with the glow of the Bengal light tinging with rose tones each column and frieze, the effect is indescribable. It is said that before this natural altar, 9 couples have been married, and cave tradition tells the story of the pioneer subterranean bride, who, having pledged her mother that she would never marry a man on the face of the earth, here fulfilled the letter, if not the spirit, of the vow by an underground wedding.
Johnston's time underground gave her respect for this unseen environment. She was spellbound by what she had seen and photographed.
Many excursions to points not often visited followed the first explorations, each succeeding visit revealing new and beautiful features, till I thoroughly realized that the half has never been told, possibly is not known, of the wonders, the immensity, the grandeur of this weird and marvelous place in the depths of the earth. Its fascinations grow upon one and engender a spirit of adventure and longing to the discoverer of new marvels and beauties.
Johnston was faced with difficult circumstances trying to shoot photographs underground. Her final photos are revealing and in some ways startling, revealing to the modern viewer that after 100 years, the cave hasn't changed. But the contemporary artists who now explore Mammoth Cave National Park have advantages over Johnston. Photographer Ray Class was an artist in residence at Mammoth Cave National Park. He lived in the park for 3 months, getting to know the land above and below intimately.
And I remember when I was a kid, we went to the national parks and we spent a day at Arches. We spent a day at the Grand Canyon. And you can't see all of either of those parks in just a day. And so my opportunity here to live here for 3 months is something that I wanted to communicate, that you know, you might go for an hour on a cave tour, or you might go hike for 2 hours, but there's so much here, you could spend a lifetime and not see it all. Well, the surface to me had just so many things. I mean, being from New York and seeing the eastern forests, you know, I was amazed by, the first thing that struck me was the lack of rivers, because we are in that karst geology, and so that water does run into those sinkholes, and it was amazing, almost kind of a game to try and catch the waterfalls when I could. You know, that day after it rains, you got the water trickling down, and then all of a sudden, it's into the cave. And so to really explore the subtle differences, I mean, there were tremendous wildflowers, and I went camping in the Green River, and just so much to explore on the surface, and the history, some of the churches and the graveyards, and what it was before it was a national park.
Photography in the cave has its own challenges and rewards.
One of the things that I enjoyed, the first cave tour that I went on, was that the guide who was leading it turned off all the lights for just a minute. And you experienced that total darkness. And you experienced that total lack of noise, lack of smell. You're really in another world. And so just really trying to capture that, I think molded the way that I photographed the cave, because I was able to build with the light, to build that reality for the viewer. And so it was sort of a blank canvas. I mean, you start down there with darkness. Photography is the capturing of light. And so to be able to take a single flashlight, a single lantern, and to place them and to build up that texture and shape and contour was really interesting. One of the things that makes Mammoth Cave unique to me, the first thing that I really think, are these enormous passages. Because a lot of caves have the stalactites, the stalagmites, but Mammoth Cave is well, mammoth. I mean, not only is it long, but the passages are big, and it was a challenge photographically. One of the ones that I particularly like is of the rotunda room, and it was a difficult shoot because I try to get away in creating this other perspective, other world in my images. I try to get away from some of the tourist trail, the markings, the banisters, and really try to create that atmosphere that might have been there 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago. And so there's a picture of the rotunda room where because of the way we cropped it, and I had some help from friends with flashes and flashlights, and it really just creates that circular feeling on top of the picture, and a human element. I've got a person modeling in there, and to show the perspective of this enormous cavernous room and all of the beauty on the walls there. I'm not the first person to visit Mammoth Cave National Park, but I'm seeing it for the first time. And so my photography, it tries to capture that, and for me, that's really the fun, is to go out there and to try to bring some of that back and share it with other people.
A common theme for those who are drawn to the cave is a need to find those unexplored places, to be the first to set foot on virgin territory.
In the 21st century, that there are still places that you can go that no human has ever been before is a pretty rare thing. The space shuttle, is flying over the Earth and mapping out mountains and all the features on the Earth. There are new mountains to find. Every single one has been mapped out by now, and it's easy to think that the world is just completely explored, that everything's used up. But there's places in caves, and other places on the surface that are harder to get to. But there's places in caves where literally you can go that no human has ever been before. And many of those places are in remote areas of jungles or places that are very difficult to get to. And Mammoth Cave, we can have that experience, but it's here in rural Kentucky. You can drive right up to the entrance, and the cave is so extensive that there are passages, many passages that are still not explored. And for many people, the experience of traveling somewhere where you are the first person ever to go there to put footprints on the ground is really, it's almost like a drug to some people. That it's it's an experience that is just so overwhelming to some people that it really kind of draws you to go to a lot of effort to to try to put yourself in that situation.
When you're in a cave that no one's been in before, you definitely get that man on the moon feeling. You can walk into a room where you leave the first footprints in that room. 100 years, 200 years from now, when people come into that room again, yours will still be the footprints there. So it's a very rare privilege to go somewhere where you can actually be the first human to see something, where you don't have, a huge government funding you. So, you can just buy a helmet, buy the knee pads, and go explore a cave.
So how many places on the earth can you say that, well, no one's ever seen that mountain, or no one's ever been to that ocean? Well, you can still say that about caves because you can't see caves, so you don't even know if they're there. So the challenge is to find a cave, and if you find something, it's pretty guaranteed, if it was hard to find, that no one's ever been there before. And so, you get to be the first one to put footprints in Virgin Passage. And that, just from the purely exploration point of view, that's pretty darn exciting. It's like going to the moon almost.
The need to discover is what drives the exploration and discovery. It's what has motivated scientists in the park to use unusual methods of investigation to reveal more of the seen and unseen faces of the park.
My original interest in caving was as a cave explorer, and that interest was, well, where does the cave go? Like, how much cave is here? Where is it? How can we find more? And so that was what originally got me interested in caves in general. And when you do that long enough, and and one of the ways that you explore is by making maps. And when you do that long enough, you start to see patterns, and you want to understand, well, where can I find more cave? And what you realize is in order to find more, you have to understand what exists and why it's there. And so the question of, well, why is this cave here in the first place? That's really the thing that is of great interest. And there's a lot of reasons why there's either caves there or why there's not caves there.
There's a lot to learn about Mammoth Cave, and the first thing is where it is. There's some 370 miles or so that's known so far, but there's still very likely many miles of cave passages to be discovered. Expeditions are continually held several times a year by the Cave Research Foundation, and in Mammoth Cave and the other caves close by in south central Kentucky, new passages are discovered on a regular basis. So it's nearly 400 miles. Another cave close by is over 100 miles. It comes very close to connecting with Mammoth. Another cave is 35 miles long and also comes very close to connecting with Mammoth. So the three of those together are some 500 miles in length. And but how much is there that we don't know?
Linking disparate parts of the cave system together can give clues to how big Mammoth Cave really is. And explorers are partial to areas of the cave they've personally mapped.
When I was looking for an area, they said, well, where do you want to work in Mammoth Cave? And I'm like, well, what area is no one working? And Proctor Cave, the reason why it was so interesting to me is because it's this little branch of cave that's out there, and there's this ridge that doesn't have anything else around it. And so the potential of, finding something else in that ridge, that's kind of what got me interested in that particular cave.
Or Louisiana.
This particular part of the cave has the potential to connect to another cave system that's outside of the park. And this other cave system is 35 miles long at this point in time. As a matter of fact, there's an expedition now, as we speak, right now, where people are out there trying to make it longer. And our ultimate goal is to find a way to connect that piece of the cave to my little piece of Mammoth Cave. And so that's what has interested me in that particular area, and that was kind of the driving force that makes you go back. And you kind of need a driving force, because caves are not always pleasant places to be, okay? It's not like the commercial trail where you have a nice comfortable trail to walk on and you can have places to sit and it's big, and if you get tired you can rest. You know, many of these places have water in them, they're crawlways, they're kind of unpleasant places. But what keeps you going and documenting and exploring those things or those places is the potential of what you might find. And so you have to have that drive to get you to go deal with all that physical unpleasantness.
The scientific research being done in the park is important in the information it can bring, but also because it can answer some important questions about the area that have gone unanswered.
Mammoth Cave certainly is a living cave, and there's maybe a couple different ways that we can think about that. The first thing is that it depends. It's a long cave. It's a very, very extensive area in there. So really what's going on depends on exactly where you are, and there's miles and miles of passages that are relatively dry, that don't see much life. It's among the top handful of caves in the world in terms of the biodiversity in there, the number of different species that exist. Many of these are focused in the streams where there's water.
There are 2 species of blind cave fish in the underground waterways of the cave, as well as other denizens of the dark that are rare or endangered. Finding these cave-adapted species is difficult, which makes studying them a challenge.
So little brown, it's a male.
The park is also home to several species of bats, some of which are in danger of becoming extinct. Scientists are studying them in hopes of finding out information that might be vital to their survival.
Okay, what we've got here is the target species. This is a Rafinesque's big-eared bat. This is really a pretty rare species. It's found scattered locations throughout the southeastern U.S. Mammoth Cave National Park has about the highest concentration of these anywhere. And it's because we have this combination of big old hollow trees and buildings, like the building we're netting next to, which is, to a bat, a building is a big hollow tree. And then we also have numerous caves here and sandstone rock shelters, so it provides both winter sites and summer sites. Now, Rafinesque's big-eared bat, notice the ears. It flies with the ears kind of pointed forward, and it's at least partially a gleaner, which means it can actually hear an insect walking on a leaf and can actually pick a moth off of a leaf or off of a tree trunk, which is pretty amazing.
Historically, people thought the caves were lifeless. You know, apart from the odd bat or the odd cricket, there really was nothing in there. But it turns out the caves are actually teeming with microorganisms. There's a high amount of diversity in there. There's a lot of novel species, things that have never been described to science before. And we're only now starting to kind of pick away at the threads. There's this huge blanket of information that is a cave environment. And the microbiota are weird and strange. A cave environment is a very starved environment. There's not a lot of energy there. So we find a couple of things. One is that microbes use a lot of energy sources that life on the surface doesn't use. So they can't rely on photosynthesis. So they do things like eat into the rock. So these are your rock-eating microbes because they chase nutrients and energy into the rock. The other thing is that it's such a starved environment, it's very hard for one species to make a living on its own. It can't do it by itself. So they have to cooperate, which is the opposite of what you expect with ecology, that organisms, instead of competing for food, actually share resources. And we're still trying to understand how this works, but that promotes a vast amount of diversity because everybody becomes a specialist that contributes to the community, and the community as a whole survives.
Discoveries made in the Mammoth Cave have real-life applications that reach far beyond the park itself.
The thing that we found about microorganisms in caves is they have a huge amount of potential, both in terms of human health and maintaining clean drinking water, potential for new drugs, antibiotics. They have a lot of capabilities to do things that we haven't yet understood. So they can break down some pretty complex molecules. So some of the organisms that we've identified from caves can actually break down plasticizers in plastics. So if you have a contaminated site where there's plastic and the ground is contaminated with this toxic material, the microbes can come in and chew that up and remove it. It's a process called bioremediation. And it appears that cave microbes, because of the complexity of the environment, how difficult it is to get food, will eat anything. So you can actually spray them on something pretty toxic and they'll clean it up. So we pull these organisms out, they're new, they're bizarre, no one's ever seen them before, and they're doing weird and wonderful things. And that's really propelling the science much faster ahead than we thought was possible, given that we're, crawling around in caves looking at bugs. Microbes in caves have a phenomenal amount of potential because of all the problems they've had to solve. It's just not one, high levels of CO2, or two, temperature. It's how do I get this energy from the rock? How do I convert it into a usable product? How do I defend myself from somebody who wants to eat that product? So, we're looking at the potential for novel antibiotics. We can use it as a test bed to figure out how antibiotics have evolved. So there is a huge potential. That's just one thing that we've looked at in caves, is this antibiotic potential. We're looking at the possibility of novel polymers. So these organisms have to stick to things, and the way they stick to things is they make a goo. And some of these goos could be synthetic plastics. They could make clothes from them. There's a lot of potential in the polymers. And we're just beginning to understand some of the abilities of these organisms now. So it's really important that we maintain caves in as pristine an environment as we can, because once you take that away, then you've lost all that potential.
Northern Parula, which is not necessarily a common bird, but it's uncommon for us to get it in the net because it's a canopy feeder.
While research in the park is ongoing, decisions about how to use the cave and surrounding area are still being made, and the realization that this natural resource should be protected began years ago. In 1844, Alexander Clark Bullitt, the author of the book Rambles in the Mammoth Cave, had this to say about protecting the cave.
Exquisitely beautiful and rare as are these formations in this avenue, it will soon be, I fear, like the Grotto of Pensacola, shorn of its beauties. Many a little miss to decorate her center table or boudoir, and many a thoughtless dandy to present a specimen to his lady fair have broken those lovely productions of the Almighty, which required ages to perfect, thus destroying in a moment the work of centuries. These beautiful and gorgeous formations were encrusted on the walls by the hands of our Maker, and who so impious as to desecrate them, to tear them from their place? There they are, all lovely and beautiful, and there they ought to remain, untouched by the hands of man, for the admiration and wonder of all future ages.
Well, a national park is really a place that we've set aside for ourselves. It's a gift that as a country we've given ourselves, that we are going to have this forever, and to be able to go and visit and explore and to really preserve, to make a point of saying this is important not just because of what it has today, but it's important that it stays like this.
I think that among people that study caves, the area between the Barren and Green Rivers, the karst landscape is a jewel that's has global significance, and I would say it's important. There's a message that people that are learning about the cave or see films about the cave will take away. It's that it is a treasure, and it's also a fragile treasure. It's good to develop an appreciation just for the fact that even though you can't see it, there's a very wonderful living world down there. And the first way to, the first part of protecting it is understanding and appreciating it.
So cool. That looks like a castle.
You know, as humans, we impact everything that we touch. So we build cities, we have towns, we have settlements, whatever. And so we impact the environment in a huge way. And so it would be kind of nice to have areas that maybe we don't impact as much, that are without as much human, the footprint of man, I guess. But there are places in all sorts of national parks, including Mammoth Cave, where you don't see a human influence, not really. You see it the way that it is, just natural, without people trying to go dominate it and change the landscape.
But certainly in the U.S., we're lucky that there are just some incredible places, some places that are unique, that are special, that provide wilderness experiences or just help kind of rejuvenate us and re-energize us.
Mammoth Cave National Park today. I will tell you this, when I drive into work in the mornings and I drive home in the evenings, not a day goes by that I don't think how lucky I am to get to drive through the beautiful scenery, to get to work with a group of people who so much believe in what they're doing. So you have a strong group of people who believe firmly in protecting this property that we're entrusted with. And then you have just the natural scenic beauty of the park. And then add to that the cultural history that goes along with Mammoth Cave National Park. And you have a place that is a true treasure in the state of Kentucky. It's right smack in the middle of the state, and to me it's the heart of the place. It's definitely grabbed my heart a long time ago.
Mammoth Cave National Park continues to be a way to wonder, where imagination takes flight and exploration into the unknown continues, where future generations can look at unspoiled beauty and appreciate the world the way it was, if only for a while.
A copy of Mammoth Cave, A Way to Wonder is available at wkyupbs.org. DVDs are $19.99 and Blu-rays are available for $29.99, plus shipping and handling.
Production funding for Mammoth Cave, A Way to Wonder comes from the Friends of Mammoth Cave National Park, Bluegrass Cellular, where wireless works, Kentucky Tourism Arts and Heritage Cabinet, celebrating Kentucky's unbridled spirit, and from supporting members of WKYU PBS.